If this were your child, wouldn't you want to know what happened?
Detail assistance, Vicky speaking. How can I help you?
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership.
All right, of course. How far is the water coming up, sir? Can you give me a description? Ankles? Hello?
What'd you say? Hey.
Yes. How far is the water coming up, sir?
It's coming up. We're just sinking. I don't know. Like we're going down now.
What did we just hear? What was that? One more time, please.
Detail assistance, Vicky speaking. How can I help you?
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership.
All right, of course. How far is the water coming up, sir? Can you give me a description? Ankles?
What'd
Hello?
you say? Hey.
Yes. How far is the water coming up, sir?
It's coming up. We're just sinking. I don't know. Like we're going down now.
4 in the afternoon on the 4th of July. Picture a boat that is taking on water faster than anyone on it wants to admit, and a teenager standing in it with a phone to his ear, trying to explain to a towing dispatcher exactly where they are. She asks him how many people are on board. Think about that for a second. You are on a boat. You have been on it all day. These are your friends. There is no easier question in the world. He cannot answer it. They get towed 3 miles back to the mainland and tie up at 5:44 that evening. And here is the thing that nobody could explain afterward. They went out that morning as a group, and they came back one short. 2 days later, a park ranger is walking the far shore of that island and finds him in the shallows, face down, a few feet from dry sand. 18 years old. He was supposed to report for football training the following week. His phone is not with him, because his phone made the trip home without him. And when his mother finally sits down and opens it, looking for the last ordinary hours of her son's life, the day is not there. For 3 weeks, that phone call sits inside a government file, and not one person outside the investigation hears a second of it. Then somebody files a public records request, and it comes out into daylight. Within hours, strangers have it slowed down and cleaned up and captioned, and they are telling each other they can hear something underneath all that panic. A name. A question you really do not want to imagine anybody asking on a boat. Then 2 people who spent their whole careers on the law enforcement side of a courtroom sat down on the same broadcast and listened to the same 90 seconds of tape. One a former prosecutor. One a former police officer. One of them heard young men whose boat was going under. The other heard a story with a hole in the middle of it. And neither of them backed down an inch. There is a document in Mississippi that speaks to some of this. The state has had it since the 7th of July. Nobody is getting it. Not the public, not the press, not even his mother, until a grand jury has looked at it first. Welcome back to the crime executioner. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He graduated from Ocean Springs High School in 2025 and enrolled at Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he played wide receiver. He was due back on campus after the holiday weekend to begin training for the coming season. Horn Island sits about 10 miles off the Mississippi coast. It is part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, undeveloped except for a small ranger station, with no bridge and no ferry. If you want to go, someone has to take you by boat. Wells had been before. For several years running, the 4th of July run out to the island had become close to a tradition for his group. On the morning of July 4th, 2026, the boat carrying Wells and 5 friends pulled away from the mainland at 9:56. Those friends were Eli Jax Patalo, Eric Alcantara, Wyatt Pyron, Warren Hudson, and Morgan Seymour. They reached the western tip of Horn Island at 11:14. They were not the only ones out there, and that detail matters more than most coverage has allowed. Trayston Shepard, a high school friend, came out separately with his own family. Bart Edmiston Jr., who had played alongside Wells at Ocean Springs High, was on the island as well, but he piloted his own boat there and piloted it home again. Shepard later told ABC News that roughly 300 people were spread out near them, many of them former classmates, and that the group had been drinking since late morning. He also described what the day was meant to be. One last hurrah before everyone scattered back to school or back to work. So by early afternoon, you have several boats, several groups, and a stretch of beach full of people who mostly knew each other. Nothing about it was unusual. It stayed that way until somebody started recording. Every boat that size has a bilge pump. It is a small electric pump that sits at the lowest point of the hull and pushes out the water that inevitably gets in. It runs in the background all day and nobody thinks about it. On the afternoon of July 4th, the one on that boat stopped working. Warren Hudson later said the boat had taken on water because too many people were aboard. Whatever started it, the water had nowhere to go once the pump quit. It reached their ankles. It kept coming. By the time anyone reacted, it was high enough to reach the batteries, and the batteries are what run the engine. Wyatt Pyron made the call. He did not call the Coast Guard. He called Sea Tow, a private towing service that boat owners pay into the way drivers pay into roadside assistance. A dispatcher picked up. Pyron told her they were at the west tip of Horn Island, that the bilge pump had failed, and that they were going down. Then the call turned into something almost mundane, which is what makes it strange to listen to now. The dispatcher needed an account number. Pyron did not have it. She asked for the phone number on the membership. He was not sure of that either. He guessed. The reception on Horn Island is poor, and the line kept breaking up, forcing both of them to repeat themselves while the water kept rising behind him. Sea Tow dispatched a vessel. It never got there in time to matter. A friend in another boat saw what was happening, came alongside, and took them under tow himself. The rest was work. They got the water out through an opening in the hull and then plugged it. The engine came back. At 4:31 in the afternoon, the boat left Horn Island under tow. It covered roughly 3 miles of open water back toward the mainland. At 5:44 p.m., it tied up. Everything about that sequence is ordinary. Boats take on water. Pumps fail. Somebody makes a call. Somebody comes and helps. And the day gets salvaged. Hundreds of people went home from Horn Island that evening with a story about somebody else's bad luck. The boat left with a group on it. It came back one short. He was reported missing that night. By July 5th, the Jackson County Sheriff's Department had gone public with what it was doing. The department was coordinating with the United States Coast Guard and with the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, and the search area was the island itself. Marine Resources brought drones. In the early afternoon of July 5th, officials launched 2 flights over the western side of Horn Island. Neither one lasted. The heat that afternoon was severe enough to swell the drone batteries, and both flights were cut short. The aircraft went up, came down, and produced nothing. Crews worked the island through Sunday and into Monday. Boats, aircraft, personnel on foot, 3 agencies operating on a stretch of Barrier Island roughly 4 square miles in size, with no roads and no infrastructure to work from. At approximately 8:45 on the morning of July 6th, a ranger with the National Park Service located him at the west end of the island. The multi-agency search ended there. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind said there were no immediate signs of physical injury. Sheriff John Ledbetter's early position followed from that. Investigators suspected drowning. There was, he said, no initial indication that a crime had occurred, though his office continued working to determine exactly what had happened. That is a reasonable conclusion to reach on day 1. It is also the conclusion Nolan's mother refused to accept. Christine Wells Wansley was careful about how she said it. She stated plainly that she respects law enforcement. But the speed of it bothered her, and it bothered his father just as much. An 18-year-old had gone to an island with people he knew, and within 72 hours the working theory was that he had simply drowned. Her question was not whether he drowned. Her question was why nobody seemed interested in asking anything else. The last time anyone confirms seeing Nolan Wells alive is around 3 in the afternoon. Everything after that comes down to whose account you accept, because there are 2 of them and they do not fit together. Warren Hudson gave his on the Officer Tatum show. He said 3 o'clock was the last time he saw Nolan, and that Nolan was with a young woman named Katie. When it came time to leave, Hudson said, his friends called out to Nolan more than once and told him to get on the boat. Nolan did not. He chose to stay. Hudson built a logic around it. Nobody gets left on Horn Island unless they ask to be, he said. Riding out with one group and riding back with another is routine out there, and he said multiple people in their own group did exactly that on the 4th of July. Nolan was not being abandoned. He was staying by choice, planning to catch a ride in with somebody else. Hudson went further. He said friends of his later reached Katie directly, and that she confirmed it. According to Hudson, she said the last time she saw Nolan was when one of them was shouting at him to board, and that she was standing right there when Nolan decided not to. The official record leans the same way. The Marine Resources Patrol report states that several of the friends told deputies that when they left, Nolan was in the company of an unknown female and had chosen to remain on the island. Sheriff Ledbetter's early account matched it. Then Katie's family spoke. Katie McCormack is 19. Her sister Gracie told the Daily Mail something close to the opposite. She said Katie had a conversation with Nolan and came away assuming he was getting ready to board the boat he had come out on. Gracie also said her sister assumed the friends calling him would never have left without him. One version has Nolan refusing to leave, the other has him under the impression he was leaving. Those cannot both be true. Somebody in this story is remembering it wrong, and the difference is not small. If you want to see which of those two accounts the evidence actually supports, subscribe now. What comes next is the one piece of physical evidence that could settle it, and it came home without him. The phone did not go into the water. It stayed on the boat. Track its movements and you get a clean chain. It sat where he left it while the pump failed and the tow came. It rode back to the mainland. Somebody carried it off the boat and put it in a truck. It went to a house, and at that house it was handed to Christine Wells Wansley. The friends have never disputed any of that. By their account, the handover was uneventful. One of them had already told her on the phone, before the Coast Guard was called, that Nolan's phone was in their possession. They said nobody had gone through it. They said nobody knew his passcode. When she asked for it, someone walked out to a truck and brought it back. Then she opened it. Nolan kept 2 Snapchat accounts. On both of them, she found nothing from that day. No saved photos, no videos, no snaps at all. She opened it inside the 24-hour window, before anything was set to expire on its own. That is what she could not get past. Nolan was the kind of person who filmed everything. At gatherings, he was the one with the camera up. He would interrupt her at night just to have her take a picture of him, and on the one day that mattered, on a beach with hundreds of people he had gone to high school with, there was nothing. There are ordinary explanations, and they deserve saying out loud. A longtime Horn Island visitor told NBC that leaving phones behind on boats is standard practice out there, because the water is too shallow to bring a boat all the way in, and you end up waiting. Brandon Tatum went out to the island himself and tested the signal. He had reception, but not much of it. 1 or 2 bars. Enough to make a call. Not enough, in his view, to push video to social media. Those answers cover why nothing was posted. His mother was not asking why nothing was posted. On Tuesday, July 28th, she stopped asking and started filing. Through the Ridgeland firm Carol Bufkin, court orders went out from Jackson County Chancery Court to 5 companies: Snapchat, WhatsApp, TikTok, Meta, Life360. They demand subscriber records, message history, photos, videos, and GPS location data tied to his number and his email, and they give those companies 21 days to comply. There were 2 autopsies, performed by 2 different offices, 3 days apart. The first was done on July 7th by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office. The second was done on July 10th by Dr. Roger A. Mitchell, Jr., the former chief medical examiner for Washington, D.C., hired by the family. Colin Kaepernick paid for it. Tyler Perry paid for the funeral. Mitchell's preliminary findings were announced on July 22nd by Ben Crump at the NAP National Convention in Chicago. Cause of death, undetermined. Manner of death, undetermined. Both pending further investigation. To understand why, you need to know what a pathologist looks for when the question is drowning. There is no single test for it. Drowning is largely a diagnosis of exclusion, built from a cluster of findings. Is there water where water should not be? In the airway and lungs? What is in the stomach? What does toxicology show? Take those away, and a pathologist can only describe what he cannot rule out. Mitchell could not examine any of them. He wrote that his most significant limitation was the inability to directly observe the airway and the lungs, and to directly observe the stomach. Toxicology had not come back to him either. The reason is procedural, and it matters, because a great deal of speculation has been built on top of it. When Mitchell received the body, portions of the neck structures were not present. The state had retained them during the first examination. Forensic pathologists told ABC News that retaining tissue for closer study is routine, not an irregularity. Routine or not, it left Mitchell unable to exclude injury to the neck as a cause or contributing factor, and he said so in the report. What he could examine, he examined thoroughly. He performed a multi-layer dissection, which forensics professor Joseph Scott Morgan described as working down through skin, then fat, then muscle, 1 layer at a time. Morgan noted it had not previously been done that way. Mitchell found no skull fractures. No major fractures anywhere. No deep tissue injuries. He found one thing he could not account for: a red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of the head, and he was careful about it. He called it inconclusive and said it deserved further investigation. Decomposition is why he could go no further. Morgan explained that once it sets in, a pathologist loses the ability to speak definitively about bruising or surface injury, because the evidence he would normally read has been altered. Dr. Priya Banerjee added a broader point. Every second autopsy carries an inherent limitation, because the body has already been through a first one. He could not determine whether Nolan Wells entered that water conscious or unconscious. He could not determine whether he entered it under his own power. The recording came out on July 27th. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released it. NBC News had obtained it through a public records request. TMZ published an enhanced version of the same file. Cleaned up, amplified, and captioned. According to the outlet, people listening believed they could make out a name, a question about whether someone was dead, an instruction to check a chest, and someone telling another person to wake up. None of that has ever been officially confirmed by anyone. Start with where the enhanced version came from. It was produced by an audio engineer who published it with subtitles representing what she believed she was hearing. To her credit, she said so. She stated openly that the captions reflected her own interpretation rather than established fact. That distinction disappeared the moment the file started spreading. Then a forensic examiner actually compared the two. Robert Freed, a digital forensics expert, went through the original and the enhanced version and discussed his findings on Jesse Weber Live. His conclusions were technical, and they were damaging. The TMZ version runs about 20 seconds longer than the original. It carries a different digital fingerprint, meaning it is not simply a louder copy of the same file. And the version Marine Resources released had already been redacted before anyone touched it, with account numbers and phone numbers stripped out. Fried's position is that he cannot verify anything from a file that has been altered twice over. He wants the original recording and he wants its metadata. Then he said something most experts would not admit on camera. He said that when he first heard what people claimed was on the tape, his own mind went straight to those words. He had to consciously set that aside and analyze the file on its own terms. That is a description of how suggestion works, and it is the most useful sentence anyone has offered about this recording. There is one more piece. TMZ's own sources reported that people who were on the boat have heard the enhanced version, and they describe it as nothing more than panic from a vessel taking on water. So the tape proves a boat was in trouble. Everything past that is interpretation. Subscribe before the next section, because two people who spent their careers in law enforcement listened to this exact recording and reached opposite conclusions, on the same broadcast, live. On Crime Stories, Nancy Grace put Brandon Tatum on live and cross-examined him. She spent her career as a prosecutor. He spent his as a Tucson police officer. Around them, she had assembled a panel built for exactly this argument. Dave Mack, her investigative reporter. Joseph Scott Morgan on forensics. Trial attorney John Mobley. Dr. Jim Jones, who directs the digital forensics program at George Mason University. Titania Jordan, of the online safety company Bark. And Heather Mahalik Barnhart, of Celebrite, one of the most experienced mobile forensics examiners working. Grace's position is that too many pieces do not fit. She kept returning to the location data. She said she has a serious problem with the Life 360 records and the phone data not lining up, that a discrepancy of a few blocks she could accept, but not the gap Nolan's mother has described. She was not buying it. Tatum's position is that he went and looked. He flew to Mississippi. He spoke to 4 of the young men who had been publicly accused, and he told Grace he did not take a word of it on trust. His framing was that the burden was on them, that he was not going to listen to what came out of their mouths. They were going to have to show him. By his account, they did. They took him out on a boat and walked him through the route, where they stopped, where they docked, how they got the water out. They showed him footage from the day and call logs of themselves phoning Nolan's mother, and he said video from the vessel showed Nolan was not aboard when it was towed. Then Grace asked whether the friends had taken polygraphs, and the exchange got sharp. Tatum said all but one had taken one and passed, none with a lawyer present, all cooperating with law enforcement. Grace pushed. Was it a polygraph? Tatum conceded he had not been in the room. Pushed again, he clarified. It was a voice stress analysis. Grace drew the line herself. A polygraph measures the body, sweat, breathing, heart rate, blood pressure. A voice stress test listens for tension in the voice. She was not willing to treat them as the same thing, and she said what she wanted: a polygraph. She also gave him something. Because he had been a police officer, she said, she credited his account. Then she added that she has had people look her in the face and lie, convincingly. There was a family voice in all this too. Warren Hudson's mother, Ashley Cole, defended her son publicly, then deactivated her accounts, writing that she feared for her children's safety. She also disclosed something that had not been widely reported. She is a judge. Neither Grace nor Tatum moved an inch. Step back from the broadcasts and look at what the actual investigation has been doing, because it has been doing a great deal. Investigators have interviewed roughly 60 witnesses. On an island where hundreds of people were present and almost all of them had a phone, that number is the real measure of the work. There has also been persistent confusion about who is running this, and Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tyndall cleared it up directly. The Department of Public Safety is not conducting the investigation. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office is. The state's role has been through the medical examiner's office. When that work is finished, the report goes to the district attorney. District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath has now explained her position on camera. The state's findings will not be released publicly until a grand jury has reviewed them. State rules direct investigators and prosecutors not to comment on or release material that could compromise the integrity of those processes. And she addressed the delay head-on. She said she understands the public's urgency to know what happened to Nolan, but that her office is not taking time for the sake of taking time. It is taking the time the investigation requires. She has also been consistent about why a grand jury is involved at all. In Jackson County, every death that is not natural causes and not a non-criminal traffic fatality goes before one. A grand jury hears the evidence a prosecutor presents and decides whether anyone should be indicted. Its involvement is not a signal that a crime occurred. Outside the system, the reeds split hard. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer reviewed what is publicly available, including surveillance footage, witness statements, Coast Guard communications, and the riptide conditions in that stretch of water. Her conclusion was that when it is all added together, what the public can see appears to be an accident. She cautioned that more could still emerge. NICS President Derek Johnson reached the opposite conclusion. He accused investigators of being derelict in their duties, of failing to follow up, of failing to ensure a proper investigation regardless of what actually happened out there. On July 20th, Nolan Wells was buried at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs. That same day, letters went out from the firm Carol Bufkin to his friends and their families. The language was formal and unmistakable. Litigation concerning the death of Nolan Wells is reasonably anticipated. The pressure has not stayed inside the legal system. Threats have been reported by Nolan's mother, by the stepmother of another teenager who was on the island, and against investigators and public officials working the case. The FBI is looking into them. Tyndall reminded people that intimidating a witness or a public official is a felony, and Attorney General Lynn Fitch issued a statement standing behind the professionals doing the work. There is now a second front. The family of Bart Edmiston Jr. has announced it intends to sue online content creators who called their son a suspect or suggested he was part of a cover-up. Everything else waits on one thing. A grand jury will see the state's file. Then it will decide whether anyone is charged, and it may decide that nobody is. Until that happens, nothing else in this case moves. When that door opens, we will tell you exactly what is behind it. Nothing more and nothing less.